For 23 years, I was his quiet, perfect wife. He thought I was just part of the furniture. He thought I saw nothing and I would do nothing. He was wrong about everything. He called me his anchor. He forgot that anchors are heavy, unseen, and taken for granted. He forgot something else, too. An anchor can be dropped, and a ship, no matter how grand, can sink. My name is Ava. For 23 years, I was the quiet foundation of a celebrated life. I was the woman in the background, the one who made sure the lights were just right, the wine was perfectly chosen, and the flowers never wilted. My husband was Dr. Leo Thorne. To the world, he was not just a man, he was a living legend. A heart surgeon who saved lives and whose name was on hospital wings and charity invitations. He was the star of every show, and I was his stage manager. I had a life before him, of course. I was a conservator of Renaissance art. I spent my days in quiet rooms with soft light, gently cleaning away centuries of grime to reveal the beauty beneath. I was good at it. I understood patience. I understood how to see what others missed. But when Leo's career began to soar, he needed a different kind of partner. He needed a wife who could host dinner parties for donors, who could look elegant at galas, who could create a home that was a sanctuary from his high-pressure world. So I put away my brushes and solvents. I became the curator of Leo Thorne's life. He called me his anchor. I remember the first time he said it. We were on a friend's boat, and a storm was rolling in. He held my hand and said, "With you, I feel steady. You're my anchor." I cried at the beauty of those words. It took me 20 years to understand the truth of them. An anchor is heavy. It is unseen, resting in the dark, deep water below a shining ship. It is taken for granted. People forget it is there. They only remember it if it fails. I was his anchor, and I was utterly, completely forgotten. The end of my world did not come with a bang. It came with a whisper. A slow, patient drip of doubt that eventually wore a hole straight through my heart. It was in the little things. The new energy in his step when he came home from a medical conference. A kind of glow that had nothing to do with a successful surgery. It was in the scent that clung to his collar when he hugged me hello. A perfume of tuberose and amber. Bold, modern, expensive. It was not my scent. My perfume was light like gardenias. This was a statement. Then, his phone. It had always been a harmless thing, left charging on the kitchen island, buzzing with hospital alerts. Suddenly, it became a part of him. It lived in his pocket. He took it with him to the garage, to the garden, and he developed a new laugh for the calls he took in private. A light, airy, delighted laugh. A laugh I realized I never heard in our own home anymore. The proof, when it came, was so ordinary it was cruel. I was paying bills, a task he never bothered with. There was a credit card statement for an account we barely used. A single charge from a famous jeweler in the city for a pair of diamond drop earrings. My birthday had been 6 months ago. Our anniversary was months away. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I asked him about it that evening, trying to sound casual. He was at his study desk, signing donor thank you letters. "Leo, I saw a charge for Verotti's, diamond earrings." He didn't even look up. His pen kept moving. "Oh, those." "Yes, a thank you gift for Arthur Brigham's wife. He just pledged $500,000 for the new cardiac wing, a small token of appreciation." His voice was smooth, effortless. He even reached into a folder and slid a generic, pre-printed thank you card across the desk to me. "See, we send it with the gift." It was perfect. It was logical. It was a lie. Because as he said it, his eyes, which were usually so direct and commanding, flickered for a fraction of a second to the left. A tiny, unconscious tell. I would have missed it if I hadn't spent 23 years studying his face, learning every line and shadow, always searching for signs of his approval, his happiness. In that flicker, I saw the truth. A quiet, cold dread settled over me. I began to look, not as his trusting wife, but as an investigator. I looked through drawers he never opened. I checked old files, and one day I found it. In the back of his sock drawer, wrapped in black velvet, was a watch, a Patek Philippe. A watch worth more than my first car. I turned it over. There was an inscription on the back. For my guiding light, always your Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia. The constellation. The mythical queen. A North Star guides you, but a queen demands worship. The pain was physical. It felt like a metal band was tightening around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I sat on the floor of our walk-in closet, surrounded by his impeccable suits and my silent dresses, and I waited for the tears to come. They didn't. Instead, the pain was pushed aside by something else. A glacial, pure, and utterly clarifying fury. This was not a messy affair, a brief stumble. This was a second life, a parallel universe he had built with care and money. He had bought her jewels. He had accepted a watch from her. He called her his queen, and he saw me. What did he see me as? The manager of his household, a reliable piece of furniture. The quiet potted plant in the corner of his grand office. He was so sure of my simplicity, so confident in my ignorance, that he didn't even try very hard to hide it. His arrogance was his greatest weakness. It was the crack in his golden armor. I did not cry. I did not scream. I walked calmly to our pristine kitchen, sat at the marble island, and I began to plan. The woman I had been, the accommodator, the peacekeeper, the gentle soul, she was gone. Shed like an old skin, in her place was someone new. Someone forged in cold fire. I was an art conservator. My whole training was about patience, subtlety, and the careful removal of layers to expose what lay beneath. Thorne had spent years painting a beautiful, false portrait of himself. My final masterpiece would be to strip that varnish away, layer by layer, until only the ugly truth remained. My first move was information. I needed to know my enemy. Not just the woman, but the full scope of his betrayal. Through an old friend from university, someone who worked in the shadowy world of corporate security, I was introduced to a man known only as Kale. He was a ghost. We never met in person. Our communications were through encrypted channels. His fee was large, and I paid it from an inheritance account my father had left me, an account Leo had long forgotten existed. Kale's reports came slowly, in pieces, over weeks. Her name was Lillian Vance, 28 years old. She was not a musician or a fellow doctor, but a rising star at a contemporary art gallery called the Vanguard. Leo had recently become a major patron. Kale sent photographs. She was all sharp cheekbones and severe, elegant beauty. Her eyes looked through the camera, assessing, calculating. The details were worse than I imagined. Leo hadn't just rented her an apartment. He had purchased a sleek, modern condominium in a converted downtown warehouse. The title was held by an LLC called Cassiopeia Holdings. He was the sole funder. He had also donated a massive sum to fund the Vanguard's new, avant-garde wing, which just happened to feature Lillian as its lead curator. There were trips. Not just weekend getaways, but Art Basel in Miami, a private viewing at a palazzo in Venice. They were living a glossy, international life on my husband's money, but the deepest cut came from transcripts. Kale had intercepted snippets of their conversations. Leo had built a story for her, a narrative about our marriage. In his telling, I was Ava, the fragile, childless wife. A woman plagued by nervous anxieties, emotionally dependent, a delicate burden he carried out of a weary, noble sense of duty. He spoke of our home as a silent prison, of our marriage as a hollow shell kept alive only by his pity. Every private joke, every shared memory, every quiet moment of companionship I had nurtured over 2 decades, he had reduced it all to a clinical case study in his own martyrdom. He was the brilliant hero, saddled with a broken wife. That lie, that grotesque rewriting of my very existence, was the final fuel for my rage. My revenge would not be a crime of passion. It would be a project, a systematic deconstruction. With Kale mapping the secret life, I turned my attention to our real one, our money. Leo was a big-picture man. He made the large investments, gave the grand donations. The day-to-day management of accounts, the taxes, the bills, he considered that trivial and left it to a team of accountants and, by default, to me. I had always handled it efficiently, quietly. Now I would use that trust as my weapon. I began a deep study of our finances. Joint accounts, trusts, investment portfolios, the home equity line. I became a scholar of our own wealth, and I began a campaign of quiet redistribution. It was the work of a ghost. I set up a small, private offshore company with Kale's help. Then I began to move money. Not large sums that would trigger alerts, but tiny, regular amounts. A few $1,000s transferred from a joint money market account here. The sale of some blue-chip stocks my grandfather had left me, stocks Leo had never asked about. I created fake invoices from a fictitious antique restoration service, and paid them from our home equity line, funneling the money straight into my hidden reservoir. The wealth of Leo Thorne began to bleed away, drop by precious drop, into a well he would never see. While I worked on our finances, I also fortified my own position. I reached out to my oldest friend, Eleanor. We had been roommates in college. Now, she was one of the most feared divorce attorneys in the city, known for dismantling arrogant, wealthy men. We met for long walks in the park, where no one could overhear. "He's having an affair," I said, my voice calm. "It's extensive. He's bought her an apartment, funded her career." Eleanor nodded, her mind already working. Adultery is good. It gets you sympathy. But with a man like Leo, sympathy isn't enough. He'll spin it as a midlife crisis, pay a settlement, and come out wounded but still a saint. We need to scorch the earth. "That's what I want," I said. "I don't want him penniless, Ellie. I want him exposed. I want his professional life incinerated. I want the world to see the man behind the mask. The divorce should just be the paperwork we sign at his funeral." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with a fierce light. "Then we need more. We need professional ruin. We need something that makes the hospital board, his donors, his peers, turn on him. We need to prove he's not just a bad husband, but a bad doctor. Or at least, a dangerous one." The opportunity to find that proof came from Leo's own growing carelessness. Distracted by Lillian's world, her gallery openings, her demands for more of his time, his godlike focus at the hospital began to waver. Cale, through his network of contacts, heard whispers. He connected me with a woman named Helen, a former surgical nurse who had worked in Leo's unit. I met Helen in a quiet corner of a public library, not as Ava Thorne, but as Anna, a researcher looking into patient safety. Helen was angry and had nothing left to lose. She told me how she had questioned a post-operative medication order of Leo's. She thought the dosage was too high for the patient's weight. Instead of discussing it, Leo had her removed from his service the next day, transferred to a less prestigious ward. Her career had stalled. "He couldn't stand being questioned," Helen whispered, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "It wasn't about the patient, it was about his authority." Through Helen, I found others. A young resident named David, whose research Leo had taken credit for, and who Leo had later given a damning performance review to, stalling his promotion. And an anesthesiologist, Dr. Chen, who had witnessed a terrifying near-miss. Leo had rushed into a surgery, barking orders. In the rush, a medication vial was mislabeled. Leo almost administered a drug that could have stopped the patient's heart. A vigilant nurse caught the error at the last second. When Dr. Chen tried to report the incident as a mandatory safety check, Leo had dismissed it. "A minor clerical error," he'd called it. "Don't waste the committee's time." These were not vengeful people. They were good people, silenced by fear and by Leo's immense power. They were sitting on grenades of truth, afraid to pull the pin. I listened to their stories. I did not record them. I simply absorbed them. The pattern was clear. It wasn't one big mistake, but a habit of arrogance. A belief that the rules were for other people. The brilliant surgeon was becoming, or perhaps always had been, a liability. Meanwhile, the pressure in Leo's secret life was building. Lillian's new gallery wing had opened to mediocre reviews. Her ambition, once flattering, was turning hungry. She wanted more visibility. She wanted to be seen on his arm at public hospital fundraisers, at society events. She began to send him texts that mixed flattery with threat. "I'm not just your secret, Leo. I'm your future. When do I get to have my real life with you?" Leo, a man who commanded operating rooms, was floundering. He was trying to balance 2 full-time lives, and the strain was showing. He became short-tempered with me, forgetful of simple plans, his nerves stretched thin. The impeccable mask of Dr. Leo Thorne was developing hairline cracks. It was time to apply a little pressure. I created an anonymous email account. I called myself the Chronicler. I began to send Lillian carefully chosen pieces of information, not lies, but curated truths. I sent a society page photo from a year ago of Leo and me at the opera ball. We were smiling, my hand on his arm. We looked, to my own private sorrow, genuinely connected. The caption read, "Power couple Dr. Leo and Ava Thorne, a picture of marital bliss." A few days later, I sent a link to a financial news article about the risks of personal liability when using LLCs to hold property. Then, a simple, anonymous tip. Heard the hospital board is doing a deep dive into all charitable fund allocations this quarter. Nerves are high. I wasn't trying to break them up. I was trying to make her paranoid. To make her question his stability, his invincibility, his ultimate value as her ticket to a better life. I wanted her to become more demanding, more desperate, a constant source of noise and drama in his ear. If he was busy putting out fires with Lillian, he would be deaf to the silent, sharp blade moving toward his back. The crescendo of my plan was always going to be the annual Heart Foundation Gala. It was the social event of the season for the medical elite. That year, it was bigger than ever. Leo was not only receiving the Luminary of Medicine award, but the board of directors was set to formally nominate him as the new chief of surgery that very night. It was to be his ultimate triumph, broadcast live on local news, covered in the society pages. He would stand at the absolute peak of his world. In the final weeks, I accelerated everything. The offshore funds were consolidated and moved once more, a ghostly ballet across digital borders. I used some of that money to sign the lease on a beautiful, sun-drenched loft apartment across the city, paying the entire first year's rent in cash from an untraceable source. I packed a single, small suitcase, not of my designer clothes, but of the things that were truly mine. My grandmother's locket, a few first edition books, a simple silk robe Leo had always said was too plain. I left the suitcase with a leaner. The day before the gala, I made my most important delivery. Dressed in the generic uniform of a courier, a baseball cap and a jacket with a fake logo, I walked into the hospital's main administration building. I carried a large bouquet of white lilies and a plain manila envelope addressed to Mr. Jonathan Croft, the chairman of the hospital board. He was known as a stern, morally rigid man. "Flowers for Mr. Croft's office," I said to the receptionist, my voice slightly bored. She glanced at the flowers and the envelope. "You can take them up. His assistant might be at lunch. Just leave them on the desk in the outer office." I rode the elevator up, my heart a steady drum in my chest. The outer office was empty, as predicted. I placed the lush bouquet of lilies prominently on the assistant's desk. Then, I slid the manila envelope deep into the middle of the stack of afternoon mail waiting to be opened. Inside was a single, unmarked USB drive. On it was a dossier. It began with a one-page summary that was so shocking in its clarity, Croft would have no choice but to act. The summary showed a direct financial trail. Donations made to the Heart Foundation Children's Cardiac Care Fund, money donated by the public for sick kids, had been diverted. They had been moved through a series of accounts and ended up funding Cassiopeia Holdings, LLC. Attached were fake invoices from a medical supply company for equipment that was never ordered. The amounts on those invoices matched, to the dollar, payments made to the contractor who renovated Lillian Vance's condominium. It was not just theft, it was theft from a children's charity. It was the kind of sin that even powerful friends could not overlook. The timing was perfect. Croft would see it late in the afternoon. His fury would burn through the evening. By the time the gala began, the entire executive board would be in a state of suppressed, furious crisis. The night arrived. I dressed with the meticulous care of an artist preparing to destroy her own masterpiece. I chose a gown of liquid silver. It was a color Leo had once, offhandedly, said, "Wash me out." Tonight, it made me look like a blade, sharp and cold. I styled my hair sleek and simple. I applied my makeup not to soften my features, but to highlight the angles of my cheekbones, the line of my jaw. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. An elegant, formidable, and utterly calm stranger. Leo was a bundle of nervous energy. "This is it, Ava," he said, fumbling with his bow tie in the hallway mirror. "After tonight, it's the pinnacle, everything we've worked for." I stepped close to him, smiling gently. I reached up and adjusted his tie, my fingers perfectly steady while his trembled slightly. "Everything you've worked for, my love," I corrected, my voice a soft caress. "I'm just so proud to be your wife tonight." The lie flowed from me as smoothly as silk. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and ambition. Crystal chandeliers sparkled over a sea of black tuxedos and gowns that cost more than most people's cars. Leo moved through the crowd like a reigning monarch, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. But I saw the tightness around his eyes. He was scanning the room, looking for the board members, for Jonathan Croft. He finally spotted Croft standing in a corner with a small, somber group of directors. Leo's confident approach was met with cold, brief nods. No backslaps, no warm handshakes, no congratulations, Leo. A flicker of confusion, then a flash of pure anxiety crossed his face before he smoothed it back into professional charm. The first tremor. The first domino I had placed was beginning to teeter. Dinner was a blur of rich food and long, boring speeches praising the hospital's work. I played my part perfectly. The attentive spouse, smiling, nodding, occasionally leaning over to whisper something in Leo's ear that made him smile tightly. My small, silver clutch purse rested on my lap. Inside was a single, custom-made device. It was a high-frequency signal blocker paired with a miniature transmitter, courtesy of the most inventive contact in Kale's network. It was synced, via a backdoor program, to the gala's main presentation system, a program that had been installed weeks ago by a temporary AV technician. Finally, the keynote address began. A famous news anchor took the stage and spent 10 minutes listing Leo's achievements, his genius, his compassion. Leo sat beside me, a statue of eager anticipation, completely unaware that the pedestal beneath him was crumbling. Then the moment came. And so, it is my profound honor to present this year's Luminary of Medicine Award to Dr. Leo Thorne. The applause was thunderous. A standing ovation. Leo stood, basking in it, a wide, triumphant smile on his face. His eyes scanned the crowd and found mine. He gave me that old, familiar smile, the one that used to hold love and now held only condescending victory. He mounted the steps to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. "Thank you, you humble me. This award isn't just for me, it's for every life we've touched, every family we've comforted." My hand was in my purse. My thumb found the single, unmarked button on the device. I took one final, deep, quiet breath, and I pressed it. What happened next was a sequence of beautiful, precise chaos. First, a low, resonant hum, inaudible to the human ear, pulsed from my device. It was a frequency specifically designed to trigger the vibration motors in smartphones. All around the ballroom, on the crisp white tablecloths, 300 phones buzzed in perfect, unsettling unison. It sounded like a swarm of angry insects. People jumped, looked down, confused. At the podium, Leo faltered, losing his place in his speech. Second, the command to the presentation system executed. Behind Leo, the giant screen displaying the Heart Foundation logo dissolved. It was replaced by a stark white slide. On it, in simple black font, was a single line: transfer $250,000 from Heart Foundation Children's Cardiac Care Fund to Cassiopeia Holdings LLC. Memo: Art Installation Commission. A wave of confused murmurs swept the room. Leo turned, squinting at the screen. His face was blank, uncomprehending. The slide changed. Now it was a scanned copy of a property deed. The address was for a luxury condominium downtown. The owner was listed as Cassiopeia Holdings LLC. And there, clear as day at the bottom, was his signature as the personal guarantor of the loan. The murmurs grew louder, tinged with unease. "What is this?" a man's voice called out from a nearby table. "Technical error?" Leo barked into the microphone, his voice pitched high with panic. He glared toward the AV booth at the back of the room. "Someone fix the screen?" The slide changed again. This time, it was a series of text message screenshots. On the left, Leo's messages: "Can't talk now, but thinking of you. I'll see you Thursday. I can't leave her, Lillian. She's too fragile. You have to understand, you're my real life. Be patient, my queen." On the right, Lillian's replies: "How much longer do I have to be a secret? I'm tired of being your hidden masterpiece. When do I get the frame? What am I, your mistress or your masterpiece?" The room erupted into uproar. Gasps, shouts, the sound of chairs scraping back. Camera crews, who had been filming the award ceremony, swung their lenses from Leo's ashen, sweating face to the damning screen, then to me. I sat perfectly still, my face a calm, impenetrable mask. Then came the final blow. The coup de grace. The screen went black for 2 full seconds. The noise in the room dipped into an anxious hush. Then, a video began to play. The footage was slightly grainy, from a hidden camera. The angle was from high in a corner of a wood-paneled room, our home study. It showed Leo in his favorite leather armchair, a glass of amber bourbon in his hand, his phone to his ear. The audio was crystal clear. A woman's voice, petulant and young, Lillian's voice. She's always there, Leo. In every society photo, hovering in the background, it's like a ghost. Does she suspect? Leo's laugh filled the ballroom speakers. It was a dismissive, weary, utterly contemptuous sound. Ava? God, no. She's atmosphere. She's the potted fern in the corner of a very grand room, necessary for the overall aesthetic part of the environment. You give it water, it stays green. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't have questions. It just exists, quietly. That's her function, and she performs it adequately. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air, the sound, the very life out of the grand ballroom. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Every single head in the room turned, not as one, but in a slow, horrified wave, from the monstrous, casual cruelty on the screen to me, to the potted fern. The humiliation was so complete, so profound, it was beyond scandal. It was an exhibition, a display of pure, unadulterated contempt for everyone to see. In that echoing, paralyzing silence, I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, and filled with a terrible grace. The sea of black ties and sparkling gowns seemed to part before me as I stepped away from the table. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at the cameras, though I knew they were fixed on me. I walked with steady, silent steps toward the podium. My silver gown caught the light, making me look like a moving shard of ice. Leo stared down at me from the stage. His mouth hung open. His eyes were wide, not with anger, but with a dawning, apocalyptic horror. He was not seeing his wife, his anchor, his quiet Ava. He was seeing a phantom, an avenger he had unknowingly created over 23 years of neglect and betrayal. He was seeing the consequences of his own arrogance, made flesh and walking toward him. I stopped at the very base of the podium steps. I looked up at him, meeting his shattered gaze. I held it. In my eyes, I let him see everything. The cold intelligence, the months of meticulous planning, the patient gathering of evidence, the glacial fury, and the absolute, complete lack of mercy. I offered him no words, no grand speech. My lips curved into a faint, faint smile. It was a ghost of the warm, loving smile I used to give him. In that moment, it was more terrifying than any scream. Then I turned, and I walked away, down the long, central aisle of the ballroom, through the frozen silence. Past the hundreds of faces, faces of his colleagues, his rivals, his donors, his so-called friends, all frozen in shock. I felt their stares like physical touches, but I did not falter. I pushed through the heavy, ornate oak doors at the back of the ballroom, and I stepped out into the cool, quiet darkness of the night. I left behind me the ruins of Dr. Leo Thorne. The fallout was swift, public, and merciless. The hospital board demanded his resignation before the gala was even over. Jonathan Croft personally handed the financial dossier to the district attorney. A criminal investigation for fraud and misuse of charitable funds was opened. The state medical board, upon receiving an anonymous package containing the witness testimonies from Helen, David, and Dr. Chen, immediately suspended Leo's medical license, pending a full inquiry that would almost certainly end in its permanent revocation. Lillian, her golden ticket publicly exposed as fraudulent, gave a series of vicious television interviews. She painted herself as a victim, a young woman manipulated by a powerful, married man. But the art world, seeing the scandal and the source of her funding, wanted nothing to do with her. The Vanguard quietly closed its new wing. She disappeared from the society pages as quickly as she had arrived. The divorce, orchestrated by a leaner, was a forensic and humiliating dissection. With his income gone, his reputation in tatters, and facing legal bills, Leo had no leverage. He signed the settlement agreement without a fight. It gave me the house, which I sold, and a substantial portion of what remained of the marital assets, though a large chunk was already frozen by the court or had quietly vanished into my offshore accounts. He was left a hollow shell, stripped of his title, his career, his wealth, and the precious reputation he had cherished above all else. I moved into my sun-drenched loft. The funds I had secured afforded me a life of quiet, profound liberty. I returned to the art world, not as a conservator working in the background, but as an acquirer for a prestigious museum. My eye, trained to see past surface beauty to true value and hidden flaw, had never been sharper. I reclaimed my name, the one I was born with. I was Ava Sterling again. I saw him once, about 2 years later. I was walking along the river path near my apartment. He was sitting on a bench, the one that had a plaque honoring donors to the hospital, a plaque that did not bear his name. His coat was shabby and too thin for the weather. He was tearing a stale bagel into pieces and throwing them to a flock of pigeons gathered at his feet. His hands, those famous, skilled surgeon's hands that had held beating human hearts, now trembled slightly. The great Dr. Leo Thorne, reduced to begging for attention from birds, he never saw me. I stood and watched for a moment from a distance. There was no pity in my heart, only a cold, quiet finality. He never expected me to uncover his secret. In his story, I was supposed to cry a little, accept a modest divorce settlement, and fade away graciously, allowing him to continue his grand narrative with a new, more dazzling co-star. He never anticipated the vengeance of the quiet woman. The one he believed was part of the furniture, as unthinking and unfeeling as a potted fern. He forgot a simple, ancient truth about anchors. An anchor doesn't just hold a ship steady in a storm. It is also the last, heavy piece that remains when the ship itself is gone. When the proud vessel, rotted through by its own arrogance and flawed construction, finally gives way and sinks beneath the waves, the anchor is left behind. Solid, unmovable. A silent testament to what once was, I didn't need to sink his ship. I simply let go of the rope. And from the safety of my new, solid shore, I watched him drown in the deep, cold waters of the consequences of the careless life he had built, and the beautiful, terrible betrayal he had sown.